with only $17 to be given to teachers.
They were brought to fill the gap because the STEM teachers for sciences were not employed in junior school. This is a group that if they not attend to their learners in class, there will be no learning in those institutions.
Tumewaambia kwamba hakuna kurudi shuleni hadi serikali imewaconfirm. Si vizuri tume ya kuajiri walimu iajiri walimu wa sayansi kama watu.
Right, moving on, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, that is the IBC, has fined Kasipul by-election candidates Philip Rocco and Boyd Were 1 million shillings each following violent clashes that led to the death of 2 people. Now, the commission has warned that any further incidences of violence linked to their campaigns will result in the immediate disqualification from the race. On November 6th, at least 2 people were killed during confrontations between supporters of the 2 candidates as a political rally in the Opodo area. Now, central Kasipul ward in Homa Bay County, the IBC ruling comes just a week before voters in Kasipul head to the polls to elect the next member of parliament.
Is that okay? Mr. Philip Rocco, for the violation, is hereby condemned to pay a fine of Kenya shillings 1 million to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission within 48 hours of these orders. D, that Mr. Boyd Were Ngondo is condemned similarly for the violation to pay a fine of Kenya shillings 1 million to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission within 48 hours of these orders. E, a most stern warning be and is hereby issued to both candidates that should any violation of the Electoral Code be repeated by any of them, this committee will consider all penalties under the law, including, with emphasis, their disqualification.
I just want to state here that myself, I've been a peaceful man since I started this campaign in 2023. So I still keep it peaceful. I've signed this document bearing in mind that if I do anything that is opposite, the circumstances that will follow may not be favoring.
I want to urge my supporters, I want to urge all candidates in the Kasipul by-elections, all residents of Kasipul, let's maintain peace. Let's embrace each other. It's only 1 week to the by-election, so let's campaign peacefully, let's maintain peace. At the end of the day, we'll only have 1 member of parliament, and at the end of the day, the people of Kasipul will choose their member of parliament.
All right, we shall be waiting to see, what unfolds in the Kasipul Member of Parliament office. And we'll remember that, the office was announced vacant when the then Member of Parliament, that is Charles Ongonto Were, was, allegedly assassinated. And of course, the matter is actually in courts. All right. Moving on, the ODM has launched the final leg of its campaigns in Kasipul constituency ahead of the next week's by-election. Speaking at a rally in Kachieng village, ODM National Chairperson Gladys Wanga called for peace, condemning recent clashes in the area and urging security agencies to heighten patrols. ODM candidate Boyd Were also pledged to run a peaceful campaign. The leaders urged supporters to refrain from any acts that could disrupt the polls.
Never again will our young people lose their lives because of politics. Haitafanyika tena kwa hii Kasipul ama hii Homa Bay ama region yetu yote. Na sisi kama wanachungwa tumekubaliana ya kwamba kampeni zetu kama vile unaona leo tutafanya kwa amani, kila mtu arudi nyumbani kwa amani, na sisi hatuzungumzii mtu mwingine yoyote.
I want to urge the people of Kasipul and all candidates in the Kasipul by-election, let's embrace each other. Let's campaign peacefully. At the end of the day, we only need 1 member of parliament.
We as the ODM, we want to hold peaceful meetings and we'll maintain that up to 27th of November.
All right, at the same time, a fierce political showdown between former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and his successor, Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki, continues to unfold in Mbeere North constituency as campaigns for the upcoming by-elections gain momentum. Both political heavyweights have been conducting grassroots campaigns, deploying the door-to-door strategy and engaging with locals in eateries and community spaces, each working to drum up support for their preferred candidates. These developments come just 1 week before the by-election scheduled for 27th of November. Campaigns are also ongoing in parts of the country, including Malava, Kakamega, Magarini, Nandi, and Kasipul. Right, at the same time, campaigns for the upcoming by-elections are hitting fever pitch. The United Opposition leaders were in Magarini rallying support for their DCP party candidate, that is Stanley Karisa Kenga. During the rally, they launched a scathing attack on cabinet secretaries and government leaders, accusing them of jeopardizing political fairness by participating in by-election campaigns. Led by Kalonzo Musyoka, the coalition warned that government officials must not use their positions to influence voters, emphasizing that by-elections must be conducted transparently and in accordance with the law. Now, the opposition also called on the IEBC and security agencies to ensure campaigns remain peaceful, free from intimidation, and fair to all candidates.
Haikuwa pesa halali, ilikuwa hongo, walikuwa wananihonga ili nisiweze kuwa kwa debe. Na mimi nikasema ili kuhifadhi heshima ya wana Magarini na heshima yangu ya uongozi, ni lazima nitafute mbinu ya kuweza kuwa kwa debe. Ndio DCP wakanihifadhi, wakanibeba, na kwa sasa tuko kwa debe na tunaomba tuweze kushirikiana ili tuweze kukomboa Magarini yetu hii.
Mimi nasikia ati serikali nzima iko hapa, ati kuhakikisha wamemnyima tena ushindi, ati wanapanga watamuibia yeye kura, ati wanapanga wamekuja na mapesa.
Naomba kabisa tafadhali tupigie Stanley Karisa Kenga ili tuje naye pale bunge tuweze kuwatetea.
Hii ni mwanzo wa mambo ya kuleta order kwa nchi yetu, kusema Kenya must change, na Kenya haiwezi kuendelea vile vile hawa ambao wanakuja usiku na
Right, moving on, Kenya has received a major boost in its drive towards universal health coverage after the World Health Organization handed over a consignment of ambulances and critical medical supplies valued at 350 million Kenya shillings to President William Ruto. But the donation is expected to strengthen healthcare services across the country with a special focus on expectant mothers and infants. Speaking during the handover of the emergency medical equipment, President William Ruto urged both public and private hospitals to provide accurate data on maternal and infant mortality, pointing out that deaths during childbirth are still being reported in several counties.
The maternal and child mortality is unacceptably high. We cannot be losing upwards of 300 in 100,000 while the benchmark is 70. I mean, it is completely unacceptable. And going forward, we have agreed with the DHA is going to provide data, and every facility in Kenya, public or private, every facility must provide data on mothers and children who die in their facilities. I know that there are facilities that continue to hide data on mothers who die or children who die in hospitals. We must get the data right because we must get our act together and reduce the death of mothers and children, especially at birth.
President Ruto insisted he wants to see the number of maternal death going down. And we support fully. For our media, pregnancy is not a disease. It's a physiological change of the body. So no one is supposed to die.
Excellency, I want to commit to you under your leadership and with the UHT program that we are implementing as a country, I want to commit to you and me and my team and our Council of Governors that we'll do whatever it takes that no mother or child dies.
Right, still on matters, healthcare clinical officers in Nairobi represented by the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers, that is KUSO, held a protest demanding payment of 16 months in unpaid salary arrears. The healthcare workers previously contracted under the now defunct Global Fund program presented a petition to the National Assembly yesterday. The National Assembly Health Committee Chairperson Dr. James Nyikal received a petition and said the committee will seek clarity from the Ministry of Health and on the way forward. Now, the clinical officers also demonstrated against the government's failure to honor promises to absorb them into permanent and pensionable positions, a commitment made after their contracts under the Global Fund expired last year.
We have done more than 10 times and we are not getting any solution. So the only thing that we want from this government of ours, we only want two things, bare minimum. We are requesting that we get paid our 16 months salary with immediate effects because it is long overdue. Secondly, we are requesting and we are demanding to be given permanent and pensionable employment because we are Kenyans.
When the Global Fund was coming in, they actually took care of the transition of these officers, and they made sure they had an agreement with the government through the Ministry of Treasury and the Ministry of Health that after the exit of Global Fund, the government was supposed to absorb these health workers.
When they came in, TB was a major public health issue. This group of employees fought TB until now the numbers are down. Now that the numbers are down, the Ministry of Health have decided that they are useless. They are no longer useful.
As a committee, we'll take up this matter. I'll actually ask the Speaker that this comes to our committee. Then we will look at it, and when it's come to the budget, I would actually want it to be done together with the UHC workers.
Now, the dispute over ODM's cooperation with the government in the broad-based arrangements continues to escalate after Lagos Songa Member of Parliament Samuel Atandi urged party supporters to ignore those opposed to the move. Atandi, speaking during a funeral in Nyaluanga, took direct aim at some of ODM's veteran leaders, accusing them of being out of touch and standing in the way of party's entry into national leadership. Now, he maintained that ODM's cooperation with President William Ruto is in line with the late Raila Odinga's position, saying the veteran opposition leader had endorsed the broad-based government before his passing. His sentiments were echoed by Gassen Member of Parliament, that is Ali Wario, who urged members to safeguard Raila's legacy, uphold unity, and reject any form of internal sabotage.
Selfish leaders who think that they can fill Baba's shoes. They think they can jump up and fill Baba's shoes and be able to take the party to presidential election. We are telling you no. Nobody in ODM can be able to fill the shoes that have been left by Baba Raila Odinga. We need time. They were with Jaramogi, they were with Raila. William Ruto, a son of a peasant, came from nowhere and grabbed power and went to State House. What were they doing when William Ruto was doing all this? If James Orengo, you have ideas, if you think you are brilliant, you know the future where this country should go, how come Ruto came from nowhere and took power and well, you are still just mangering there?
Sasa sisi tushikilie hapo na sisi tukule matunda ya Kenya ile tumekosa wakati yote.
The ODM that we want to build now must be the ODM that is hell-bent in winning state power.
All right, moving on. A stern warning has been issued to politicians accused of ferrying goons from outside the western region to disrupt the ongoing by-election campaigns in Malava, with authorities saying their days are numbered. Western Regional Police Commander Isaac Mohammed says investigations are already underway to identify those behind the East Kiza chaos, where one person was reportedly assaulted and lost teeth. Mohammed has directed security officers to maintain order, impartiality, while dismissing claims by DAPK's Malava parliamentary candidate, that is Seth Panyako, that police officers were bribed by his rivals to disrupt his campaigns.
criminal offense. People are coming as far as from other counties, neighboring counties, that is Trans Nzoia, that we share a border, and Kisumu, and sometimes Siaya, where they hire criminal gangs and political goons. So we'll be firm on that. Those who are planning to do or engage in violence, that behavior is not acceptable and is illegal. And we'll meet it with a swift police action. Some 4 or 5 days ago, we had an incident in Posero where there were problems there at a rally. And where individuals were harmed, citizens were harmed in that rally. So a certain political group they have had their own goons, and they came with crude weapons. And you come with gangs from other counties to come and intimidate others. That will not be allowed.
Right, now more away from that, moving on, more than 500 border operators in Machakos County held a day-long special prayers to raise awareness on road safety and to remember their colleagues who have lost their lives in a series of recent road accidents. Led by local pastor, the riders came together at a time when motorcycle-related accidents have been rising at alarming rates, claiming thousands of lives in recent years and leaving many others with life-altering injuries. Now, despite motorcycles being a major part of the country's microeconomy and a source of livelihood for thousands of unemployed youth, the two-wheelers have proved to be a double-edged sword. Authorities say up to 70% of road accidents are linked to border operators, even as a nationwide crackdown on rogue riders continues to gather pace.
Wengine wanaenda kuweka mkutano parallel na huu, lakini anakuwa pale yenda huyu ni vice chairman kuja, kwa sababu bodaboda ni watu muhimu, wapigiwa makofi. What happens to you at night if you call me you...
So mawimbi ilimpiga, mvua ikanyesha.
Bwana asifiwe.
They carry part of us. They are part of our society and part of our family. And we have seen what has been going on in our society. And we felt it is important that we put a time of prayer for them.
Baada ya kuona jumbe ambazo zilitembea katika mitandao na runinga zetu kwamba 70% za ajali hapa nchini Kenya zinachangiwa na wana bodaboda. Hapa Machakos tumejipanga na tumeapa katika kanisa mbele ya wachungaji, mbele ya Mungu kwamba hapa saa hii ni usalama namba 1, na kuzingatia usalama ni kila mwana bodaboda akuwe na bima, kila mwana bodaboda akuwe na leseni.
Na niulize wanabodaboda wetu wa Machakos County na hata bodaboda wote, wanabodaboda wote wa nchi yetu ya Kenya, kunapotokea ajali, tafadhali tuwe na ule uvumilivu ili polisi ama watu wa traffic waweze kutatua mambo ya ajali. Tusichukue sheria mikononi mwetu.
Kenya's manufacturing sector is set for a major lift with 1,300 Kenyans expected to secure jobs following plans to establish a new motorcycle assembly plant in the country. The factory, which will have the capacity to produce up to 700 motorcycles every day, is expected to boost local manufacturing, reduce reliance on imports, and stimulate economic growth. The initiative will also benefit the border sector with structured technical training and improved operational skills aimed at enhancing safety and professionalism among riders.
Is one of the major area we have started to more than 23 years ago together with our partner, working here, investing here with our partner, and proposing to creating actually this taxi segment first, which is absolutely important in terms of quality and reliability, because you cannot fail if you need your mobility solution for your work every day.
We were one of the pioneers in the border industry. Now we want to be pioneers in moving people to ride a motorbike, to get to work, to get to their friend's house, to get home, to be part of the personal segment. It'll cater to the new generation, I think. The new generation doesn't want to drive a car. They want to ride a nice bike. They want to experience a nice lifestyle. They want to experience something special.
The edges closer to the 2027 general elections, incidences of violence are on the rise in Bungoma County, with police officers now under pressure to set up security operations. Residents of Maini Ward in Kimilili constituency are raising the alarm over insecurity, claiming armed gangs have been terrorizing the area. Aspiring political leaders say some victims have even been shot, and are now urging security agencies to act swiftly to restore order and protect residents ahead of the 2027 polls.
Maaskari walikuja wakafanya uchunguzi yao, mpaka saa hii sijaona jambo lolote. Jana mwendo wa saa 10 jioni, kuna huyu ndugu yangu anaitwa David Barasa ambaye alikuwa MCA Kimilili Ward. Alikuja mahali na akaanza vita. Wakati tulijaribu kujitetea, aliumiza ndugu yangu mmoja, kijana wangu anaitwa Tekno, mkono ikavunjika. Alafu si kwenda kuripoti, tuliandikisha. Baadaye OCS anakuja tu mwendo saa 1 ananichukua ati nimehitajika Bungoma. Sasa nataka kuuliza OCS wa Kimilili alikuwa ananipeleka wapi, na mbona maisha yangu imekuwa yenye hatari sana, na mbona nimekuwa na report cases zangu pale Kimilili Police Station na hakuna hatua yoyote imekuwa ikichukuliwa.
Tunasikia tu ya kwamba tunahitajika sijui kwa county commissioner, sijui tunahitajika kwa county commandant, but hakuna leta yoyote, barua yoyote ambayo wakili amepewa ama ambayo si tumepewa ya kuonyesha tunahitajika.
Right, that particular story takes us to a short breather, but when we come back, we tell you what exactly the newspapers are saying. Don't go too far.
Transforming your world.
To the program, we tell you what's happening in the dailies today, and I'm having the Daily Nation newspaper and the Standard newspaper dated today, the 20th day of November 2025, a day which President William Ruto, of course, is expected to give his State of the Nation address later on in the day at 2:30 p.m. All right. Now, the Daily Nation, of course, the Standard newspaper has got that particular story, and of course, what do you expect from today's State of the Nation address? And from the previous State of the Nation address, what was talked about during the State of the Nation, the previous one, are there, have they been fulfilled or not? 23059 is our SMS line. Start engaging us, and I'll be sampling your feedback even as we proceed with the program. Now, top story, the headline of the Daily Nation says promises versus reality. And of course, there is a picture there of the statesman, the president himself, President William Ruto. It says the scorecard is a mixed bag of President William Ruto as he makes his third State of the Nation address today. Now, while his administration has scored some successes in agriculture, cost of living, economy and infrastructure, the education and health sectors are still a big challenge. What's your plan, Mr. President? That's a question right there on the Daily Nation front page, and that's a story on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Of course, the Daily Nation has actually, has a table right there of the president's 2024 pledges versus achievements. All right. Now, the promises he made on matters healthcare, he said implement universal health coverage, that is the UHC, and ensure equitable access to reduce corruption and improve efficiency. All right. Now, current status as it stands, SHA debt crisis of 76 billion Kenya shillings persists. All right. And Rufa hospitals owed 15 billion Kenya shillings. Many have abandoned SHA. Now, the healthcare remains expensive despite more registered health facilities. Do we have sick hospitals in the country according to the current status of, the healthcare in the country? All right. Moving on to matters agriculture and cost of living. That is the 2024 pledges versus the achievements. The promise was reduce inflation and cost of living through improved food production. And the current status actually is inflation fell to 2.7%, lowest in 17 years. All right. Now, import dependency ratio dropped to 17.3%, showing improved local food production. But of course, that's, a plus to the head of state. And of course, the Ministry of Agriculture and that is the CS Mutahi Kagwe, who recently, took charge of the office after President William Ruto reshuffled his cabinet following a protest, anti-government protest, which were witnessed the previous year, that is the year of 2024. Now let's take a look on matters finance and economy. The promise made was stabilize the shilling and strengthen the economy and promote GDP growth and job creation. But the current status stands as shillings appreciated from 162 Kenya shillings to 129 Kenya shillings to the dollar. That is 20% gain. All right. And GDP growth slowed to 4.7% in 2024. That is 5.7% in 2023. Also, 782,000 new jobs created in formal sector accounts for 90%. Now let's take a look on matters education. Now the promise made was resolve teacher shortages and stabilize universities, improve access to quality at all levels of learning. Now, as it stands, the current status is 76,000 teachers have been hired, 24,000 more to be hired, and university increased 70 to 72, but funding declined from 30 billion Kenya shillings to 12.9 billion Kenya shillings. HELB loans increased to 46.9 billion Kenya shillings, but lecturers' strike disrupted learning. All right. Of course, you'll remember that the universities actually ended their strike recently. We saw that the strike persisted for almost 2 months in the universities, and of course they resolved that. Of course, we have been seeing crisis in the cash crunch crisis in the education sector. Even as issues of ghost schools and ghost students appeared during the regime of the current president, that is President William Ruto. All right, that's a story on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Now, moving on to matters politics, why I had fears of a post-Raila family fallout. That is Oburu, who's the brother of the late Prime Minister, the late former Prime Minister, that is Raila Amolo Odinga. And ODM party leader Oburu Oginga has revealed he once cautioned his brother Raila Odinga about the risk of bitter fallout within the larger Odinga family if they did not conclusively settle what is, quote unquote, outstanding matters. That's on page 10 of the Daily Nation, of course, that was speaking during an interview with this particular newspaper. And on page 2 of the Daily Nation says confusion, pain, as what is quoted as Kazi Maju lands youth in financial trouble. Now, what was sold as a golden opportunity for Kenyan youth to work abroad has turned into a nightmare for hundreds of youths who feel that they were duped into taking loans to secure the jobs. Now, months after applying for jobs abroad under the government Kazi Maju initiative, the loans borrowed from the youth fund have matured and deductions have been initiated, yet they are still waiting to secure the promised employment. Now, some who resigned from their jobs in the country to prepare for their positions abroad have been left stranded, turning into casual laborers. Now, more than 700 youths from, the coast and Nairobi who applied for the loans in May say they were told that the loan repayments would start 3 months after deployment at up to 33,000 Kenya shillings per month. And of course, there are pictures there of the youth, what we may say as defrauded youth, right, who, were set to seek for greener pastures abroad, but they're left stranded after, resigning from their previous workstations. And of course, it's so unfortunate for them. Now, 200,000, that is the amount in Kenya shillings that was wired by the youth fraud, or the youth fund to recruit for the recruitment agencies per candidate, and 700 number of the youth who were recruited by the agencies in Nairobi and the coast region. 14 is the number of hours some youth say they have expected to work according to the new offer letters. This is double the 7 hours stipulated in the first offer letters they got. Now 3 is the months after which the youth were supposed to have been placed in their new jobs abroad. Of course, you have seen scandals, in the youth seeking to secure jobs abroad. We've seen, especially in the Eldoret side, where parents, came up saying they have sold all their belongings to make sure that their kids actually get, education or jobs abroad. But that turned to them after they realized that they were actually empty promises. Right? That's a matter that we hope that the government will actually address, because parents and guardians are suffering, not to mention the youth. All right, moving on page 4, major sectors struggle as Ruto delivering his third State of the Nation address. That's on page 4 and 5 actually of this Daily Nation, and the address is constitutionally requirement and comes as the country gears up for the several by-election next week, a legacy dependent on the administration's bottom-up economic and unity pledge come to bear Dr. Ruto, who is pressed for time with a year and 9 months to the general election. Now, exactly a year after President William Ruto promised to improve the country's healthcare, reduce the cost of living, address issues affecting education, and fix the economy, Kenyans continue to face tough times. While delivering his second State of the Nation address during a joint sitting of the National Assembly and the Senate on November 21st of 2024, Dr. Ruto pledged to, quote-unquote, tirelessly steer the country from the brink of unprecedented economic collapse and onto a more promising trajectory. I don't know what you make of that particular remarks made by the president back in November 21st of 2024 in the National Assembly, that he will work tirelessly to steer the country from the brink of unprecedented economic collapse and onto a more promising trajectory. Right now, he said, by eliminating human interactions, the government will tackle corruption, reduce inefficiencies, and ensure resources were used where they would be needed most. However, 76 billion Social Health Authority, that is SHA, owed to members of the rural and urban private hospitals, that is ROFA, as well as mission health institutions empaneled by SHA, has led to healthcare being more expensive than before. All right, that's on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Of course, what the head of state promised in the earlier State of the Nation back in 2024, November 21st, versus his achievements is exclusively on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. On page 6 is the state weaponized, what is termed as weaponized digital platforms to quell protest. Now, online harassment, trolling armies, unlawfully surveillance, internet shutdowns, mobile phones tracking, and coordinated smear campaigns were part of the state-sanctioned strategies used to weaponize Kenya's digital infrastructure during the 2024-2025 Gen Z protest, a new report says. Now, this is according to the report by Amnesty International. It's a disturbing ecosystem in which government agencies are allied to networks used social media, that is SIM card data, AI generated content and mobile networks to intimidate, monitor, silence, or ultimately shut down, rather hunt down demonstrators. Of course, that's not a new thing. We've seen that, bloggers being chased by what may be seen as the authorities, right? Of course, the head of state, that is President William Ruto, recently, signed the Cybercrime Act into law, which was actually halted by the courts, saying, after a petition was filed. Right now, we're yet to see, what's in that particular bill that was signed during the death of the late former Prime Minister, that is the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, because that's when the Cybercrime Act was signed, was assented by the head of state. All right, that's on page 7 of the Daily Nation. Now let's take a look on what's making headlines, or what the Standard newspaper has to say this particular morning as far as the governance of this country is concerned. Now, top story on the Standard newspaper this morning says, real state of the nation. Right, Kenyans have spoken. They do not need another ritual of promises. They need a state of the nation that starts where life is actually lived, in the security, the anger, the shuttered services, and the daily grind of 13 million households. Until leaders speak to the honest, painful baseline, every grand vision remains just another speech drifting above a struggling nation. And going by past rhetoric, it could be another season or the session of oratory full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. That's on page 8 and 9 of the Standard newspaper. And of course, as the Daily Nation did, the Standard newspaper has actually, given us a sneak peek of what was promised during 2024 State of the Nation, of course, or rather what is actually happening now, right? Now, public finances, people worry that fiscal consolidation means more taxes, higher service fees, and new levies. The central question is whether more financial pain is coming. That's on matters public finances. Now, on matters economy, the public is focused on jobs, incomes, wealth, opportunities, and the soaring cost of living. Infrastructure talk carries little weight without relief from rising food and household expenses. Now, in matters of security, Kenyans want honesty about crime, terrorism, cybercrime, illicit trade, banditry, and every safety. They expect a realistic plan to reduce fear and insecurity in public and private spaces. All right. Now, in matters of corruption, a credible State of the Nation account must admit the scale of corruption and outline measurable reductions. Anti-corruption talk without conduct lacks legitimacy. Now, on matters devolution, confusion over national versus counties roles continues to affect access to services. Effective devolution should ensure Kenyans that services without needing to navigate government bureaucracy. Governance and service delivery. Now, despite digital platforms like e-citizens, bravery, insufficient and slow services persist. Citizens want real improvements in service delivery, not just new payment systems. All right, and of course, we have seen that there has been a back and forth with the counties and the national government. The county governors are disputing the e-procurement platform. All right, and of course, recently the government put in place, or rather made all its institutions to pay through the e-citizen. Actually, now if you go to any public the government organization that you need to pay, be it national parks and whatnot, you have to pay through the e-citizen. All right. Now this they say is a form of curbing corruption in the country. But what do you think? To the SMS line. That particular story is on page 8 and 9. Let's take a look at that on what the Standard newspaper has to say in regards to the state of the nation. Now, on page 8, State of the Nation, that's the title. People First National Address starts by tackling households' basic needs. All right. Now, we want a nation united in its diversity. We need a state that is capable of competent. We are developing innovative ways of funding infrastructure. We are steadily removing the obstacles to meaningful and faster growth. All right. Now, we want a nation in which prosperity and opportunity is shared by all. We want a nation where no one goes hungry. We want a nation in which there is quality healthcare for all. We want a nation in which everyone is safe. We want a nation that is free from corruption. We want a nation that is at peace with the world. We will work together to build the nation that we want. We will work together to build a nation that works for all. That is Dennis Kabara's quotes. Now, where do these words come from? These are snippets from South African President Cyril Ramaphosa 2025 State of the Nation address to a joint sitting of Parliament last February beyond the interesting we, not me style. Each of these, goal statements is backed by the strategic actions to deliver the goal. So, by example, their innovation is infrastructure funding is, guess what, an infrastructure funding fund does not, this sound familiar? That's, goes on and on on page 8 of the Standard newspaper, and quite interesting what, the Standard pulled out right there. The words of President Cyril Ramaphosa in his 2025 State of the Nation. He says, and I repeat, that we want a nation united in its diversity. We need a state that is capable of competent. We are developing innovative ways of funding infrastructure. We are steadily removing the obstacles to meaningful and faster growth. We want a nation in which prosperity and opportunity is shared by all. We want a nation in which there is equality healthcare for all. We want a nation in which everyone is safe. We want a nation that is at peace with the world. We will work together to build a nation that we all want. We will work together to build a nation that works for all. Those are the words of Cyril Ramaphosa, and he was trying, to bring this aspect of we, not me. All right, that's on page 8 of the Standard newspaper this particular morning. And of course, on page 9, of course, is matters to do with the Ruto democracy pledge under fire amid violations. Now, an year ago, the president, that is President William Ruto, talking points in his State of the Nation address was the importance of citizens' freedom and fundamental rights, noting that these lie at the heart of both enterprise and democracy. Now, he added that the country's governance systems must be fit for purpose, capable of protecting people and their property, safeguarding freedom, facilitating democracy, and promoting market efficiency. Now, for this to happen, the president said law enforcement must be robust, judicial integrity, efficiency and independence, absolute, and the right to the protection under the law of non-negotiable and impartial. Ruto noted that things had changed, including a shift of the national political conversation from personalities to issues, from regional to or ethnic larges to opportunities for youth and hustlers, from regional and ethnic larges, from division to inclusion, and from the status quo to bottom-up economy transformation for shared prosperity. Of course, what President William Ruto actually shared at that time during his campaign was, to uplift what he termed as bottom-up, and, the hustler narrative that, he would uplift the hustlers. Now, I don't know what's your take on the current regime as at now. All right, today he's actually set to deliver a State of the Nation address of 2025. We're yet to hear, what is there for us. All right, moving on page 2, still on matters State of the Nation. Kenyans worse off despite Ruto's loud promises. Now, as President William Ruto prepares to deliver his third State of the Nation address before a joint sitting of Parliament this afternoon, his administration is under intense pressure to ease the financial burden on households. Now, this follows 2022 pledges, which he renewed last year, to lower the cost of living, grow the economy, and create employment opportunities. Now, but as 2025 ends, Kenyans are worse off than a year ago, with the cost of basket of essential goods from food to transport having risen sharply, and according to the government data. Now, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics reports the annual consumer price inflation held steady at 4.6% in October, the same rate as in September. However, the headline figure masks a deeper, more painful reality for families. Analysis of the KNBS data by the Standard shows that the over past 12 months the prices of numerous daily essentials have surged, and now most severe pain have been in the food basket, a category that carries a heaviest weight in the consumer price index, eroding purchasing power and stretching budgets to breaking point. And of course, these matters that we have seen, the 2024 anti-government protests led by the younger generation, who dubbed themselves as the Gen Z, actually, it's something that is happening. The country, as the Standard says, the country is worse than it was an year ago in matters, economy. All right, and the cost of living to the ordinary man. Right, and we've seen, the activists and the younger generations trying to come up, to tell the government that they need to do something actually for their future. All right. Now, on page 3 of the Standard newspaper, man's driving license cost him insurance claim. That's on matters corridors of courts, and the man's driving license landed him into trouble in an accident compensation claim after the High Court ruled that the comprehensive cover he got for his car was out of misrepresentation. Samuel Karanja Ruiru's license indicated that he was authorized to drive classes F and G, which are meant for motorcycles. High Court Judge Helena Namisi said if he had disclosed this to Madison Insurance, the insurer would have made an informed decision on whether to accept the risk. Now, to add salt to injury, by the time the accident happened, Karanja's vehicle was in another person's hands. One Dennis Dirango Karanja, whose license had expired actually. Now that's on page 2, or on page 3 of the Standard newspaper. Now, this story, of course, you all know Geoffrey Mosiria, who was the Chief Executive Officer of Environment, that is Geoffrey Mosiria. Now, Mosiria was moved as Sakaja reshuffled the 10 chief officers. Now, the outspoken Chief Officer for Environment, Geoffrey Mosiria, has been moved to citizen engagement and customer service in a reshuffle affecting 10 offices. Mosiria had been regularly recording and posting on social media his impromptu visits to noisy clubs and churches and irregular business, attracting both admirers and critics. Ibrahim Otieno, also known for his TikTok presence, now takes over the docket. In changes announced by the Governor Johnson Sakaja, Michael Waikenda was retained in the mobility docket and appointed acting ICT infrastructure head. Lydia Madhya moves to the business and hustler opportunities docket, while Godfrey Akumali takes over her housing and urban renewal. Sunday Oyolo has moved to medical facilities, leaving the digital economy and starts up docket to Wilson Gakuya. Tony Kimani takes over social services and state management. Clement Rapudo will now head Smart Nairobi docket, with Zipporah Mwangi taking over city culture, arts and tourism. Chief officers implementation of policies and the accounting officers. Right now, Geoffrey Mosiri is no longer, the chief officer for environment, according to the reshuffles made by the governor of Nairobi, that is Johnson Arthur Sakaja. Now, Geoffrey Mosiri has been moved to the citizens engagement and customer service docket. All right, and you remember that, Sakaja found himself under siege previously, this year, better part of this year, where MCAs actually wanted to impeach him, but they gave him time, to work his things out. It seems that he did work his things out, because the MCAs they have not come up again. All right, moving on to matters education. What teachers, parents expect from President. Now, President William Ruto faces mounting questions over unresolved issues in the education sector as he delivers his year's State of the Nation address, from growing anxiety in the management of junior secondary schools and the confirmation of JSS interns, the uncertainty over the looming transition to senior secondary schools, to the controversy over medical cover. Teachers are still waiting for answers. And of course, there has been issues in education. We've seen, teachers go in protest, teachers demanding, salaries, and their CBAs being acted upon, not only in junior secondary schools and the primary schools, but also in the varsities, where varsities, we've seen varsities have been in crisis for at least 2 months, where lecturers have been on strike, leaving education in jeopardy. Of course, the students' calendar, being moved forward. And of course, education is actually ministry that, the head of state should actually need to look to put into consideration, keep bearing in mind that the teachers actually demanded, they were moved from Minet, that is the cover they had before, to the now SHA, all right, of which some disputed that the transition from Minet's cover to SHA, all right. That's a conversation, the government needs to put into considerations on matters education, because it matters, the ordinary man, what he or she can give his king is education. Of course, we're also saying that, the Treasury CS, that is John Badi, said that in the few years to come, the education may not be able to give, what he termed as free education. The government puts some money in schools, which, is a reprieve for parents, where parents are, supposed to give a certain amount, a low amount that they should give, because the government already chips in. Now, John Badi says that the government, according to the current state of the government economy and what's happening in the country, the government may not be able to actually fund, or rather, fund the free primary school education. And of course, that's a matter that I shall be keeping tabs on during the State of the Nation address, which is slated for today, 2:30 p.m. All right. Now, Matters Democracy reports show that how state misused social media to threaten Gen Zs. That's a story we took a look at the Daily Nation, where the Amnesty International report revealed that the state used social media and digital tools to suppress anti-government protest between June 24th and July this year of 2025. And according to the human rights group, at least 128 people were killed, 3,000 arrested, and 83 forcibly disappeared during the demonstrations. Now, the protest driven largely by Gen Z opposed corruption and new tax policies. Social media played a central role in organizing the demonstrations, but the authorities allegedly responded with online threats, smear campaigns, incitements, and hatred and surveillance. Now, a 27-year-old Mombasa activist who was abducted for 2 nights said she received messages such as, "You will die and leave your children." Another activist was warned on X, and the quote, the text was saying, "We are coming for you." Human rights defender Hanifa Aidan targeted the Islamophobic and defamatory post after appearing in a BBC documentary said the harassment, quote unquote, took away the spark, it took away who she was. Now, paid campaigns along algorithm manipulation were also used to draw out protest hashtags. All right? And of course, you know, they say, live by the sword, or die by the sword. Now, the government used, rather allegedly used, you know, the tool that led to the uprising of the Gen Z, that is the social media, you know, to what has been seen to silence them, right? Now, the movement of the Gen Z anti-government protest actually started, you know, in social media. And the government took the social media to address their issues, where we saw that the head of state actually had an, you know, an engagement with the Gen Zs, all right? And from then there, we saw that some people were allegedly abducted, you know, even in the recent Albert Ojwang case, you know, actually came from a tweet or something of the sort that led to his arrest, right? So the social media has been also the core for all these problems that, you know, most of our young countrymen are facing right now, all right? That's on page 3 of the Standard newspaper. Now on page 4, it still matters, State of the Nation, and unmet pledges pile up as Ruto delivers that nation address. That's exclusively on page 4 of the Standard newspaper. And of course, it goes on and on and on and on up to page 8 of the Standard newspaper. Now on page 9 of the Standard newspaper, Ruto democracy under fire amid violations. Now the Amnesty International Executive Committee there, that is Director Irongo Houghton and Head of Program Victor Ndede, during the launch of the new report that indicates the numbers, you know, of they that were abducted and threatened in the social media platforms. Not to forget, even you know, some political figures, you know, some were put in caskets, some were, you know, brought out in an image, you know, not appealing, right? So this, you know, social media thing has proved itself to be a double-edged sword. It might, you know, it has its advantage, of course, also has its disadvantages, all right? We should be careful about it. Now, SHA still not meeting expectations, you know, as Kenyans, you know, decry the use of SHA. Now, if you listen to President William Ruto's State of the Nation address last year, you must have been impressed by the oratory, particularly on the prospects of a functioning healthcare system. Now, however, based on information gathered by the Standard from sick Kenyans, their relatives and doctors, public health coverage as promised through the Social Health Authority, that is SHA, is not working. Just last week, a survey by the Kenya Network of Cancer Organizations, that is KENCO, found that 60% of cancer patients exhausted their SHA cover before the end of the year, forcing them to pay out of pocket until the next cycle. And according to the organization's executive director, that is Phoebe Angadi, 70.1% of those who had run out of SHA cover did so within 6 months. Now, SHA was established after the Social Health Insurance Act was signed into law by President on October 19th of 2024, replacing now the defunct NHIF. All right. Now we've seen that, you know, some people say that SHA is working and others say that SHA isn't working. You know, what's your take on that? Have you tried SHA? And is it working for you? We actually saw, you know, earlier this year, it made headlines that a mother who went to the hospital found that, you know, SHA is not working and went over to the Ministry of Health, where the ministry was having, a meeting, and he found her way there, and of course, she was later arrested and later released because of, saying that SHA is not working, whatnot. It's actually unfortunate. Right, moving on to the newly launched Nyota Fund, Nyota program. Critics slam the Nyota, Hustler funds and ineffective handles. Now, last month, the government implemented the launch of 5 billion Nyota project, that is the National Youth Opportunities Towards Advancement, a 5-year initiative funded by the World Bank and the government of Kenya, aimed at empowering young people. The program offers skills training in specific trades and a 50,000 grant to help youth start small businesses. This comes despite the existence of Youth Enterprise Development Fund, that is Youth Fund, a government agency legally mandated to support youth in a structured and tested manner. Right, we remember that actually last month this project was actually launched, the Nyota project, that is the National Youth Opportunities Towards Advancement, a 5 billion project, a 5 billion Nyota project, which was set, the youth were set to have 50,000, those who applied for the program, 50,000 Kenya shillings, to start a business that you may think of. Of course, that's a commendable move by the government. All right, now that's what's up on the Standard newspaper and the Daily Nation newspaper, dated today, the 20th day of November 2025, a day where President William Ruto is actually, expected to deliver a State of the Nation address. Right? I had asked you, what do you expect from the address by the president? Of course, last year, November 21st of 2024, he promised many things. And of course, even as outlined by the Daily Nation also highlighted some of the achievements the government, has seen. All right? Now, what's your take on the current government, it being the third State of the Nation address? All right? I'll be keeping tabs with that particular story, and we shall be bringing you in a subsequent bulletins, and of course, a live coverage, if possible, to bring you what exactly the head of state has to say in matters of governance of this country and the state of the nation. All right? That's coming up at 2:30 p.m. today, East African time, right here on EBN television. Shall be bringing you subsequent updates and what the president and the statesman has to say in regards to that. Right, it is exactly 20 minutes past the top of the hour. You've been watching Morning Live. My name is Martin Masharia. Many thanks for keeping me company until this particular minute. I do appreciate your time. Coming up next is Your Faith Today. You don't want to miss that particular program that's coming up to you in the top of the hour at 9 a.m. Right, we'll see you later on in the day, even as we continue keeping you up to speed. Those making headlines from across our 47 counties and of course across our borders as far as news is concerned. But until then, let's do this again when God says we do.